Okay, so welcome everyone and thank you for being here. I'm Kristin Faurest from Bernheim and I'm here with Michele Brown and Connie Hill from the Kentucky School for the Blind. And we're going to be talking today about the sensory garden that we're creating at Bernheim. Just to give everybody a little overview of how this idea came about, what it looks like, where it is, I'm going to go through a few slides and then we're going to go into an informal conversation about the space and what it means to the partner communities that have been so helpful and so supportive of us. So as you see in this first slide, this is the sensory garden. There's a big, beautiful ash tree. There's some restrooms right there, some very pretty raised stone beds. There's 5 beds. It was originally conceived some time ago as a sensory garden, but it's just kind of fallen into neglect over the years. And so we decided to revitalize it and take this site that has such beautiful bones and make it into a space that really connects local communities to Bernheim and, as we say, bridges the nature gap. So this is the central bed, and there's a statue in there that was created by a previous artist in residence. And we had volunteers in there cleaning it up. We've had volunteers from the School for the Blind, from Keene, from UPS, from Families for Effective Autism Treatment, and for Dreams with Wings. We've had many different groups come through and help us get the space together. So this is what it looked like just a few months ago before we moved out a lot of the invasive plants and started to clean it up and get things going. Next slide. So what's the concept of a sensory garden and why is it good? So a sensory garden gives us a mindful experience in nature. It allows us to focus on one sense as we move through the space. We can choose which sense we want to stimulate. And so we start with touch. And there's a lot of wonderful possibilities with plants for touch. So we have soft, velvety plants, we have feathery plants, we have spiky plants, we have plants that have all kinds of different textures that are wavy or wiry. So there's a lot to explore there. So we've got a lot of these kinds of plants going in the garden. Next. Then for hearing, so you probably don't associate plants with hearing very much, and this is where we kind of have to use our imaginations. So plants can have audio qualities if they have, for example, seed pods that rattle or make interesting sounds, or ornamental grasses that kind of rustle in the breeze when the wind comes through them. But we're also going to create some other opportunities for sound in the garden. We already have wonderful sounds at Bernheim, like crickets and frogs and birds, but we're also going to be adding things like a water feature that has a nice bubbly, tranquil sound. And we're going to do a wind chime project that involves upcycled materials. We're going to have volunteers create beautiful wind chimes out of. Next. So taste. Now we already have the world's best edible garden at Bernheim. So we're going to transplant a little bit of that to the sensory garden. And we're going to encourage people to please not eat the plants that are there because it's going to be a relatively small selection, but to be inspired by them and plant them at home in their own gardens. So we're hoping to get people excited about making their own home gardens into edible gardens based on Bernheim gardening principles. Next. So quiet space. Now for people with autism spectrum disorder, this is really important to have a place that you can go to be away from other people, where you can go and retreat and just have a little solitude and focus and calm down and be yourself. So this is a way of offering that kind of space. And this has just been planted. The trees are still pretty small, but they're very dense evergreens that will create a kind of green curtain that allows people to have a sense of being cloistered and embraced by the plants. Next. So sight, now that's an easy one. So plants that have a really striking shape or color, plants that are very festive. We also want to look at planting for the 4 seasons here. So down on the bottom right-hand side, you see a kind of dogwood that has very, very vivid red wood. So in the winter, especially if there's snow, it looks really beautiful. Because we need to be reminded sometimes that gardens aren't just for spring and summer, they're for all year round. Next. So smell. And here's where it can get really fun. So they say that smell is, of all of the senses, the one that can most bring back a memory. And I think we've all experienced that. You know, you smell something and it reminds you of camp or somebody special to you, the cologne that they used to wear, or a dish that you had on a really fantastic travel adventure. So smell can be really fun to explore. And plants can have lots of different sensory experiences when it comes to smell. So they can be really sharp, they can be really soft and gentle, floral, all different kinds of notes. So this is a great place to explore smell. Next. And so here's the map that's going to be there. And we've tried to put the language of the sensory garden into language that speaks to the different communities that we've been working with. So all of these signs are going to have Braille, they'll have tactile contour maps in some cases, and they'll also have pictograms that are for people with limited verbal communication. And that's what you can see right below the title. And those are just simple symbols that tell you what each bed is for. So which one is for sight, touch, taste, smell, and sound. Next. And we've been in the process of making signage that's going to be super easy to read, very clear, very simple font, natural colors that don't jump out, but they still have high contrast and are appealing, and also represent the Braille and the pictograms as well. And here's a few shots of what the garden has looked like lately. So we've got volunteers in here from the School for the Blind, Families for Effective Autism Treatment, and Dreams with Wings. And we're planting plugs, which are pretty small, but very economical. So we're able to get quite a lot of plants. And the thing about planting a garden, you know, is it doesn't look like much at first. It's not like a building when it's finished and everybody can see it's finished. So we're going to give the garden a chance to grow in a little bit and really have an opening later in the spring when it really looks like something. And we've got all the plants in and all the containers. We chose the containers because they have nice different textures that are appealing to people who like to touch and get that sensory input. So that's it. You can stop sharing that, Alicia, whichever Alicia you happen to be. And so with this, I'd like to introduce our two guests, Michele and Connie. Would you all speak a little bit about who you are and talk also about your organization, what it does, and what kind of reach you have?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Michele Brown, and I'm the executive director of the Kentucky School for the Blind Charitable Foundation. And obviously, we work very closely with the Kentucky School for the Blind, and Connie will speak to that in a minute. But we also serve students and individuals across the state of Kentucky who are blind or visually impaired. So it's not just, students who are going to KSB, Kentucky School for the Blind. It is students and people across the state. So we serve about 1,600 students right now, and then adults, it's just a mix in regards to numbers. So, and we do everything from, helping with assistive technology to providing scholarships to doing programs such as Insight, which is a one-week program that Connie actually runs that we have at Morehead State University. And that is for students who are thinking about going on to college. So they can go live at Morehead State for a week and take classes, live in a dorm with someone they don't know, go to the cafeteria and eat. So we do programs like that. And then we also do things like low vision clinics, which Connie also runs. And the low
Connie's a busy lady.
Connie's a very busy lady. Yes, thank you, Connie. But we do about 15 low vision clinics across the state of Kentucky, and those are free to students. And Connie and a few optometrists that we work with have about 6 students at each low vision clinic. And it's an opportunity for the students, the teacher for the visually impaired that works with that particular student, and for families to come and to be assessed. So low vision is a very specific thing, and not a lot of optometrists or even ophthalmologists are trained in that particular area. So that's why these clinics are so important, because then they can determine what does that student really need to be successful in school. So we do a lot basically to, educate people who are blind or visually impaired, create independence for those who are blind or visually impaired, and then also, expand the quality of life. So, and that's why we are so excited about this sensory garden, because it encompasses all those, different things that are in our mission statement.
Thank you. Connie?
Well, I don't have much to say.
Michelle's already told us everything you do.
Yeah, I know she does. She's my PR person, but anyhow, Connie Hill, I'm glad to be here this evening. I'm low vision specialist, also a teacher of the visually impaired and orientation mobility instructor at KSB. Yes, I have a lot of irons in the fire, but I love it because it's all about the kid, and anything that's going to help a student to be independent and have more confidence in their vision and what or lack thereof, to be able to contribute to society, I'm all about it. So like Michelle said, we have a low vision clinic and then also insight program. But I'm also a teacher at the school where part of my day is working with students with their independent living skills. A couple mornings a week, I'm working on cooking with seniors in high school. Some of the students, I'm working on their vision portfolio so they know more about their vision loss and what accommodations they need to be successful. And then there are some students who have just started our school and have just lost vision. So it's a lot of teaching about their vision loss, but also is working with them on getting some counseling to assist with the vision loss. So I'm excited about Bernheim Faurest because you get excited as someone who's a teacher when you see all areas encompassed with the hearing, with the touch, with the smell, with the vision, because that's what teaching is. You want to encompass all areas. So.
Outstanding. Thank you. So I'd like to go to some discussion questions that I created just to kind of move the conversation, but then we'll also have time for other questions at the end if anybody has any. So obviously you all are very dedicated to this project because you've come on both as volunteers and advisors. You know, you've helped us with the signage and the navigation. You've been out there multiple times, and you've also given us a significant amount of funding for the project. So we really appreciate just how supportive you are on so many different levels, because sometimes people will do one but not the other, but you all have come in and just you've done so much for us, and we really are grateful. And I think you're going to have a fantastic influence in how this garden is shaped. Could you just elaborate a bit specific to public gardens and forests and green spaces? What are some of the challenges that blind and visually impaired people typically have to face, and how has that improved over the years, thanks to the efforts of organizations like yours?
Okay. Wow. When you're talking about open spaces, there's things that you have to keep in mind. First is lighting. Lighting is so crucial. Color and contrast. Signage. Is it accessible for everyone? So these are things to keep in mind. And I've noticed over the years, this is my 19th year living in Louisville and teaching at the school. I see how things have, just come so far with, yes, with ADA, but also with a lot of parents and teachers and people with their jobs wanting people to succeed. People with disabilities, it's like, what can we do? It's no longer, you cannot do this because of your disability. No, we want you to do this. We want you to take advantage of what's around you. So I just see so many businesses that have stepped up and to the plate and said, we want this for you. We want you to have the opportunity that everyone else has.
And I would add also that the mindset has changed, I would say, over the last, several years. It's no longer, feel sorry for me. I have a disability such as, blindness or visual impairment. It's yes, I may be blind, I may be visually impaired, I may have another type of disability, but I still want to engage in the community. I want to be part of it. So I think a lot of people and organizations are really embracing, building things that are inclusive, whether it's a sensory garden or it's a playground, but that's how we're moving forward. And I think that's wonderful because it is opening the doors and enabling, everyone to participate in a garden or a park or a playground.
So could you talk about some of the things that we went over in the course of designing the garden? So what were some of the things that you had to tell us that we needed to pay attention to? Because to me, this whole garden project has been, both with the autism spectrum disorder community and with you all, it's been a process of learning, asking what we need to do to get it right.
Well, Connie
Okay.
and I went out to Bernheim and met with Kristin, and Kristin walked us through the sensory garden because we had never been there. And at this point, it was still, what it had been for many years. As Kristin mentioned, it had been neglected. And Connie and I went out there and walked through it. And, and Connie does a lot of work, especially with orientation and mobility. So it's kind of like stepping into the shoes of someone who is blind or visually impaired. And, putting yourself in that position, like, okay, how would I, for example, maneuver my way to the sensory garden? And there's a nice parking lot, which is right near the garden, which is awesome. And then there's a path, a paved path. So that's important too. And then, once you get into the garden area, what do you need to have? And, a smooth paved path is awesome because when students are using, their canes, or people using canes, or even wheelchairs, we have students who are in wheelchairs and we want them to be able to go out and enjoy the sensory garden. So making sure that it's not some dirt path that, it'd be very hard to navigate, with a cane or especially a wheelchair. And then other things like Braille, and I'll let Connie speak in more detail about that because she also mentioned signage and, the color and the contrast. And that's something we all just take for granted, but to someone who's blind or visually impaired, that is huge. So, and tactile maps also.
Okay. A lot of your signage that you may see out outside, like when we were out there, is that pointing to a black sign with white lettering, and how powerful that is to see, rather than a white sign with black lettering, because a lot of times you have some people who have albinism and that may be a washout to them. If you have a black sign with white lettering, some will give you, some of the eye conditions such as achromatopsia, which is color blindness. So some of our students will be able to see that sign, which with white letters and black lettering with a black background compared to white background and black lettering, because it would be, as they say, it's just one big swirl. The black letters would be a swirl to them. We have students with retinitis pigmentosa, and that's very common with a lot of people in Eastern Kentucky. And what it is that you lose your night blindness first, and then your peripheral vision, and then your central vision, and you lose your color vision. And as a lot of the males would say, is that, well, you know what, if I get up closer and if it's a little bit wider, I'll be able to see the letters. So you're dealing with everyone, and you're trying to make something that's universal for everyone. So you always have to keep in mind the color and the contrast, because a lot of people forget that with contrast, it's also how you identify people's faces. And if it's a visual clutter or a mess, you're not gonna be able to see it. So those are the main things.
Oh. And then how do you all see the sensory garden? How do you see this benefiting the populations that you serve? How do you see them using it, or what are the different ways that they might enjoy it?
I'm excited. I'm excited because we're always trying to get our kids outside and play around with different things and to investigate. We have several students who have this curiosity, and you want to channel in to help with their growing and their learning. And I look at several students at our school right now, especially with the elementary. It's our 5th through 8th graders. They are so excited. They have so much enthusiasm. I would love to bottle it, but they would love the touching, the smelling, the vibrant colors. And, when you're on your first slide, when you were showing the plants that are silky and the pinks, I mean, I can think of 7 students right now who I would probably have to calm them down, but they're just excited. I don't want to kill their enthusiasm, but I mean, I can think of one who would be bouncing. It's just when you hit all those areas, you just bring the education more to the student, and it's empowering.
Love that. That's great. Thank you. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
She's frozen.
Is she frozen? At least she got frozen with a nice smile on her face. Every time I get frozen, look how photogenic she is. Every time I get frozen, I have a ridiculous expression on my face. Okay, maybe she's trying to reconnect.
So-
And I was thinking about this. So I was reading not too long ago about there's this expression called curb cuts. And it originally referred to, oh, she's gone. I guess she's going to come back. It originally referred to that textured depression in the sidewalk that allows you to get easily off and on a sidewalk in a wheelchair to the street and back. And once, oh, there you are. Okay, good. She's not frozen anymore. Once curb cuts became something that was commonly in use, people started to realize that actually they're good for people who are rolling a bicycle. They're good for people pushing a stroller. They're just in general make the experience of going from the sidewalk to the street more pleasant. And so curb cut has become kind of a byword for something that was meant for a specific group, but has turned out to be great for everyone. And I really see this garden as having that impact. You know, we designed it with these very specific issues and challenges in mind, but what I'm hoping is that people will find it just a place of connection and tranquility. I hope it's also a place where people outside of these communities can come to understand them a little bit better. Do you all have any further thoughts on that? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I would definitely agree with that. Yes, the garden is being built, keeping people who are blind or visually impaired in mind, or those with autism. But, I think just the general population can learn so much by going to the sensory garden. It's, a busy life we all live. And so I think it's great to A, go out to Bernheim, and then B, once you get there, go to the sensory garden, take some time to stop and smell a plant, or to feel a plant, or, to run your fingers over the braille. And, there are people who probably have never done that. They're not even really sure what braille is. So I think it'll be educational, to those who are not even blind or visually impaired, or to those who do not have autism, with the PECS imaging, that's another way to educate people. But I think overall the garden will have a positive impact on everyone who goes to Bernheim and stops by that area.
And I'm hoping this will have an impact on design as well, that this will be a good design example for students, for people who want to create similar spaces, so they can really learn about sort of sensitive universal design practices like this. And I also really hope that it's going to be a collaborative space in an ongoing way. There's this great expression that a garden is a process, not a product. And so, we have all these plans for once the plants come in, we're going to have the water feature, we're going to get these wind chimes made gradually with volunteer help. We're hoping to do an art installation with cyanotypes in the silos, which is such a fun potential art space. And we have an artist lined up to do that. And I think as the place starts to get activated, we're going to come up with all kinds of other ideas for how to really make it an exciting, dynamic space that is really responsive to the communities that it serves. So could you tell me in general, so this whole concept of bridging the nature gap, what can organizations like Bernheim and other gardens and public green spaces do to make nature more accessible to everyone? What are some just general thoughts that you would have?
Well, I think making it physically accessible so that people can get there, being able to, either take a bus or have someone drive you there. But then once you get there, how are you going to get from a car or a bus, to that particular part of a park, or sensory garden or a botanical garden? And then how are you going to navigate your way around, independently? Because I think that is key. Some people will come, like young kids probably come with their parents, and that's different. But I think being able to have the independence to truly enjoy the experience is very important, especially for adults. We've talked a lot about students, but we want a lot of adults to also go, to the sensory garden or go to other places, throughout the state, throughout the country, and be able to, embrace it and enjoy it. So I think, the more that, park systems, can embrace, being all inclusive and, presenting accommodations, that is wonderful for people with, disabilities, whether it's paved paths or braille signage or tactile signage, maps that they can use, apps on phones. So I think that's really important. And I think a lot of people and organizations are, definitely starting to embrace that more and more. Even in the, Kentucky area, we're seeing that, definitely more frequently.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm excited about the things that we're going to bring in that I didn't mention the audio app that we're going to bring in, an audio platform, which I think is enjoyable for everyone. It's helpful if you have challenges in reading the signs, but I think that's going to be something that'll offer us the opportunity to offer seasonal content and all kinds of things that'll make the space really fun and dynamic.
We've learned a lot too. We've done some all-inclusive playgrounds in different parts of the state. So the Kentucky School for the Blind Charitable Foundation, we have a community collaboration grant, which is one of the grant that we offered Bernheim. So we are looking to partner with different organizations across the state that can advance and have an impact on those who are blind or visually impaired. And so, for example, we helped build a playground down in the Berea area that's all inclusive and anyone can use it. And what we're learning by doing, different things like these playgrounds, and I'm sure we'll learn the same with the sensory garden at Bernheim, is that it really helps out even, elderly people too, so wow, now I can get to, a playground or a park, like a lot of times we forget that there are a lot of people who will be able to more easily access, these different spaces once we make them all inclusive. So it definitely has an impact on a lot of people, and it's inspirational too. So once I think different people and organizations start seeing these playgrounds and parks and sensory gardens, then they're going to start really thinking about, gosh, what can I do at my organization to make it more inclusive, and what kind of accommodations can I provide so that, more and more people can enjoy it.
Fantastic. Do you have anything to add, Connie?
I think she hit everything.
Yeah, it was pretty thorough.
Work together a lot, so.
Yeah, you all definitely seem to be in tune mentally.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments anyone wants to add?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Charlotte.
I would love to know more about what the process was for selecting the different plants. I think, the ones that have the high contrast or the different colors seem more obvious, but in terms of like choosing ones with different texture or the different sounds with seed pods, like, were you just researching images or flipping through catalogs? What did that process look like?
Far less organized than you might want to imagine, but it was a collaboration really between Ren helped us out a lot. So our naturalist, Ren, who's the head of our interpretive programs, and she's very tuned into Kentucky natives and how plants interact with wildlife. So she was looking at it with an eye towards that. And then Renee Frith, our director of horticulture, was looking at, invasive versus non-invasive, plus the aesthetic aspects. As a designer, I was pretty focused on the aesthetic aspects. I designed a sensory garden once before, so I was trying to remember how we chose the plants and what we really featured, but that was in a different country, so I had to move to Kentucky's ecosystem. So it was kind of a messy collaborative process. We just started filling out a spreadsheet, and then figured out what plants were available, and what we could move over from the edible garden, and what made sense in Kentucky in terms of being wildlife friendly, as well as meeting the criteria for the different sensory perceptions. So yeah, it was not super organized, but I think we got it done.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Someone's dog keeps wanting to chime in.
I don't see any questions coming in at the moment, but I do know that we'll be sharing this, if you're okay with that, on social media and helping other people learn more about this, because I think this is a very exciting project for the community. I think I helped with the writing for this grant, and I don't think there is one quite like this within the region or within the state. So I think that this will help attract additional audiences, other community organizations to experience this. And I think with some signage and education, I think it will be an exciting project that will come to fruition soon. So I'm hoping that this will help educate even more than what Kristin and you have already, Kentucky for the School for the Blind have already done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
So yeah.
I was just going to say, and thank you all for, doing this sensory garden. So we are very excited about it, and we think it's going to be great, and we cannot wait until spring. So when we can officially launch it.
So as kind of a conclusion, I would like to read something. I put out a note on my neighborhood social media asking if anybody around had anything that they could contribute for the wind chimes. And I got this note from a parent. And this is just to say that, sometimes when you build these bridges to nature, you don't even know where the bridge is going to take you, even though you're the one building it. So said, I have a whole bag of wind chime materials I was saving to build a wind chime in the park with my daughter. I abandoned that plan when she passed away, but I know I have the bag somewhere. All of the items ring out in a beautiful ring. I would love to donate for such a cause. She and I used to volunteer at the School for the Blind. Her name was Emma. She was a Highland Middle student and going to attend Atherton. Another trans youth gone too soon. Emma would be so happy if she could be here. I'm hoping that when I go to the storage unit that I didn't get rid of the bag, but knowing me, it's still there. This project would be right up our alley. It's exactly the type of thing we like to do. I'm so touched by how serendipitous that my daughter's dream could contribute to a community that she volunteered for. And she loved the skate park, Tyler Park, and Red River Gorge the most, but she also loved Bernheim. So thank you all. Thanks for everything you've done for us. Thanks for being here tonight, and really looking forward to seeing this place take shape and bloom.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are too.